Hello, thank you so much for joining me today. Welcome to Discussion Techniques, Conjuring Connection in the Classroom. I'm Ariella McCaffrey, Reference and Instruction Librarian at CT State Three Rivers. The session is divided into three sections. Part one is a quick look at the theory behind fostering discussion in classes. Part two highlights some research into why students aren't participating in discussion. And part three is an overview of instructional strategies and behaviors that can foster discussion. I think this beautiful quote sums up why we are all here today. We know that central to effective teaching is a connection with students. Critical pedagogy, critical information literacy, critical library pedagogy, and feminist pedagogy all value a focus on transformative dialogue between student and teacher. An important goal of instruction is to foster intentional discussion based on asking questions and entering into debate and conversation. Critical pedagogy aims to dismantle hierarchies in learning environments, prioritizes accessibility, and values and centers student knowledge and experiences. It requires collaborating with learners, adapting to their needs. It aims to foster critical thought and inquiry through students' active dialogue, reflection, and engagement in real-world problems. And from the book Critical Library Pedagogy, Nicole Pagowski and Kelly McElroy write, critical pedagogy does not diminish the role of the teacher, but rather should enhance it, where learning is viewed as a partnership between teachers and students. Based on these concepts, facilitating discussion is a necessary strategy to alter the balance of power in the classroom. How can we empower students if we're not listening to them, fostering debate, and encouraging curiosity in our library instruction sessions? This quote made me laugh. It gets to the heart of the hope I feel every time I walk into a classroom to teach. This one will work. They'll love this approach. But instead of hoping, I'd like to be more intentional in my lesson planning and use of instructional strategies. So we know discussion is a way to foster student-centered learning, but it's also a fundamental skill necessary in coursework and professional settings. When we help students successfully participate in class discussion, we may help them reduce their anxiety in other courses. This applies to success in workplaces as well. The more a student practices in class discussion, the more comfortable they'll be to participate in discussions in professional settings. Class discussion is a way to build connections for all students. From a study in the Journal of American College Health, first-gen college students commented about how working with a group on presentations took a lot of the anxiety away, a finding affirmed by a larger focus group. In another study of first-gen college students, students who actively sought out collaboration reported anxiety and an improved relationship with academics. First-gen students experienced higher than normal levels of anxiety toward public speaking, but they did not experience high levels of anxiety toward group discussion, meetings, or interpersonal communication. And from the book Academic Library Service for First-Generation Students, library instruction may be a student's first chance to interact with a librarian, is therefore an important opportunity for librarians to make a connection. When students are able to create a personal connection with teaching librarians and see them as interested in their success, they find it easier to request help when it's needed. Peer learning has been identified as an especially crucial support for first-gen students. Even limited interactions that create opportunities to learn from other students have been shown to have a positive impact. So why is class discussion difficult to generate? Let's look at some research. To start, a brief mention of the pandemic and AI. In their article, Why Young People Are Struggling to Communicate, faculty from the Stanford Graduate School of Business found that nearly 9 out of 10 students use AI for schoolwork. When a student types a complex question into a chatbot, they get a polished answer in seconds. As a result, many students have come to expect immediate resolutions to life's questions and challenges. Research suggests that using chatbots reduces mental effort, cuts brain engagement, and leads to reduced activity in brain areas responsible for memory and creativity. Students are used to finding answers easily without too much critical thinking. And of course, communicating on digital devices has affected the quality of class discussion. In the article, My Students Don't Know How to Have a Conversation, Barnwell writes, face-to-face conversation unfolds slowly. It teaches patience. When we communicate on digital devices, we learn different habits and we expect faster answers. To get these, we ask one another simpler questions. We dumb down our communications, even on the most important matters. Another issue to consider is, are you managing the classroom effectively? Are there disruptions or behavioral problems that need to be addressed? I had a class where two students talked throughout the entire session. I tried to get their attention, but they just ignored me. It disrupted the whole class. It was a failure on my part. Next time I will be prepared to split them up or ask them to leave. In a related issue, how do you handle students who monopolize discussion? Full class discussion can often reward dispositional traits such as extroversion and talkativeness, so we should use instructional strategies that allow all students to participate. Dispositional variables such as introversion, lack of confidence, anxiety, and cultural issues prohibit certain kinds of class participation. Activities in the classroom can lead to student engagement and effective learning. However, students may still struggle to participate in active learning exercises and discussion. From Improving Mental Health in the Classroom, the author describes a student who never spoke in face-to-face class, but made insightful, well-researched comments on a discussion board in an online course. When asked why, the student said she needed time to gather her thoughts before answering. That discussion moved too quickly. In small group discussion, some students worry about how their peers perceive them, fearing they weren't getting along with group members. A common theme about cold calling was that students feared looking foolish in front of their peers, what psychologists call fear of negative evaluation, feeling like they might be judged academically and found wanting by either their professor or their peers is a major stressor for many students. Paradoxically, that acute anxiety often clouds students' ability to think clearly, leading to the very outcome they dread, not being able to remember the correct answer or articulate a solid response in front of the class. I've asked myself many times, wouldn't it be easier if I just lectured? It can be scary to try new instructional strategies and risk losing precious class time. From the article, Socializing Intelligence Through Academic Talk and Dialogue, studies found that teachers experience a number of daunting obstacles when trying to use discussion. The first being the perceived pressures of time introduced by too many assessment goals. The second obstacle includes fears about the content of discussion. Teachers sometimes fear that they'll not be able to identify topics or questions that will lead to productive discussion. Another main obstacle is their concern about interactional issues, fear that students will not respond or participate at all, the fear that during discussion students will argue, the fear that only a few academically able students will participate, also that English language learners will feel unduly stressed. But studies show that lecture is largely ineffective. Education researcher Robert Marzano describes the optimal structure for instruction, the 70-30 rule. This strategy suggests that students should be actively practicing or discussing 70% of the time, while the teacher provides direct instruction or feedback for 30%. And of course, there's the problem of general anxiety and depression in our students. First-gen students were more likely to feel depressed, stressed, or upset, and academic performance suffers. From the Community College Survey of Student Engagement, GPA were significantly lower among first-gen students. And in a sample of 1,800 undergrads from a large public research university, first-gen students were less academically engaged and less likely to graduate. Moreover, the results from 1,000 freshmen and sophomores enrolled in STEM courses suggest that first-gen students are more likely to experience imposter feelings, which occur when an individual feels like they will be exposed as incompetent or unfit. In another study of first-gen students, psychological distress rose steadily through the first semester of college and remains elevated through the second semester in a sample of undergrads. But among 45 cross-sectional studies, 73% found a significant positive association between social support and mental health. The findings suggest that moderate to high levels of social and emotional support appear to act as a protective factor against anxiety symptoms in first-generation college students. And tenets of cognitive psychology are relevant to all learners. In the article, Why Students Give You the Blank Stare and What to Do About It, Blake Harvard describes 4 possible explanations for low participation in discussion. I'll follow up in the next section for some solutions, but here are the issues. Inadequate schema development. Novice and expert learners experience and process information differently. Novices do not have a lot of background knowledge on the subject and therefore have a poorly developed schema for the content being taught. You can think of schema like a net used to catch new information. Novice learners have a porous net. Not everything gets caught. Students struggle to process all of the new information being shared. Limited working memory. When working memory is overloaded on the path to long-term processing, memory suffers greatly. When the novice student is required to carry multiple bits or chunks of content in their working memory at any one moment, it can become very overwhelming and they may not even process any of the information. I can relate this to demonstrating the 15 steps it takes to get to a library database and looking up to find students lost. And forgetting happens. We shouldn't assume that others know the same information we know. Students may forget concepts they learned yesterday, never mind last semester. Repetition is always okay. Using multimodality teaching, or what I remember as differentiated instruction, can be effective for processing of information. Use visuals, mind maps, graphic organizers, and even drawings to help them retain learning. So I do have one quick pause here built in just to take a deep breath. I know we're going to hold questions until the end. Did anything come up in the chat that I should address now, or should we just move forward, Roseanne?
Oh, we can move forward.
Okay, great. So now let's get into some techniques to foster discussion. If anyone has any thoughts on what has worked successfully, please feel free to put them in the chat. So here are some of those solutions from cognitive psychology. How can we help students prepare their brains for discussion? So you can relate new content to what students already know. Help them to access background knowledge in class. This gives them a better chance of catching that new material. A pre-test of either a few questions or prompts about the content can get the students thinking about what they already know and a way to prime their memory for the new information. Invite discussion and questions during this time. Pre-testing prepares the brain for the upcoming lesson and accesses the knowledge they may already have in memory. And I don't even mean a formal test. It could just even be a question, how do you find information right now? And then that's sort of an introduction to, well, these are the resources on the library homepage. Break down new content into small chunks of information. Research showed evidence that 4 chunks are about all we can process in working memory at any one time. That is quickly depleted, however, if we don't have well-established schemas for the material. So make sure those chunks are small and with multi-step concepts. Make sure students are assessing their progress on the first steps before attempting to move to the next steps. And empathize with students who are struggling. Build in class time to work with students individually. The last one is the concept of dual coding. Dual coding as offering numerous ways to learn new material. So using simple verbal cues for explanation isn't enough. Use visuals, demonstration, and active learning strategies to help students process information in different ways. Of course, open-ended questions will result in better back and forth. Avoid asking yes or no questions. For instance, does this make sense results in a simple yes. But of course, later, several students admit how completely lost they are. Another example, I do this all the time. Do you know how to get to the library homepage? They'll all say yes. Instead, ask, can someone share how they find the library homepage? It's about the steps, not just an answer. In a productive discussion, teachers and students use one another's ideas as resources to build collective knowledge related to instructional goals. In contrast to, just think about this for a minute. Initiate, respond, evaluate. It's called IRE sequences of classroom talk, in which the teacher asks a known answer question, the student replies, and the teacher evaluates. Productive discussion includes authentic, open-ended questions, and students take on leading roles. Features of productive discussion include engaging multiple student voices, eliciting and probing student ideas, and bringing evidence into explanations. Facilitating successful discussion hinges on the teacher's ability to make adept, in-the-moment observations of various aspects of student talk and classroom dynamics. In high-quality discussions, teachers are not positioned as knowledge holders, but instead students contribute the majority of ideas. You know, as I'm going through this presentation, I'm realizing this is all about slowing down classes, right? Just slowing down the pace, giving time to listen, react, make in the moment adjustments. These are great. This was the first time I had heard of these talk moves. Talk moves are sentence frames that help students express ideas and interact with each other. These are simple families of conversational moves intended to accomplish local goals. For example, the Say More family of talk moves. Can you say more? Say that again. Can you give us an example? Is intended to encourage students to elaborate on condensed, cryptic, or vague statements. The press for reasoning moves. Why do you think that? What's your evidence? What led you to that conclusion? Are intended to get the student to explicate their reasoning so the teacher gains a better sense of the student's understanding and all students can work with it. In the process of responding, the student also gains metacognitive and communicative skills that will support more robust reasoning in future turns. These moves, also known as talk tools, are an outcome of 2 decades of qualitative classroom-based research on how some teachers skillfully orchestrate equitable and productive discussion. Teachers observed in a 2015 study of the talk move strategy were able to routinely create and sustain productive discussions in a range of content areas and across a range of grade levels. Warm calling. Warm calling is giving students advance notice and a chance to formulate their thoughts. before requiring them to articulate those thoughts in front of their classmates. So, of course, we're thinking of this as a counter to cold calling. Warm calling techniques engage the entire class instead of singling out one person. Examples include asking a question and giving down time to write the answers down, using groups or pairs to discuss answers before sharing with the entire class. But we don't want to rule out cold calling completely. Cold calling can be effective. A study showed evidence that cold calling increased both the percentage of students who voluntarily participated and the frequency with which they commented. Another study showed that the frequency of a student's participation is positively associated with learning. Also, when teachers rely solely on voluntary comments, only 5 to 8 students account for about 95% of the class discussion. Here is a quick activity. One success I've had is to do a very low stakes cold calling activity. So actually, if we could try it here, here's the prompt. When I say the word research, what is the first emotion or feeling that comes to mind? You can please put that in the chat. With students in a classroom, I have them write the word down. Then I tell them that I will call on everyone for their word. I just go around the room in a row. I say you can say pass if you don't have a word, no pressure. A few pass and the words can spark some discussion. So of course you get the range. It's an interesting little activity. I then do it again, this time with the word library. So please feel free. What is the first word that comes to mind when I say library? This time a few more participate. And I will say the words I get with library are so very different. Next time I do this exercises, I'm going to add some kind of connecting question. Why, if the library is peaceful, do you dread research? Aren't they aligned? Let's try to align them. Wait time is key. Wait time refers to two specific practices where instructors deliberately pause. First, wait time 1 constitutes a 3 to 5 second pause between asking a question and soliciting an answer. Wait time 2 is a 3 to 5 second pause after a student response. Typical wait times after a question is asked is 1.5 seconds. I could test it here, but 3 to 5 seconds seems so incredibly long, you'll think that I've left the session. The length and correctness, but so for 1.5 seconds. However, when these periods of silence lasted at least 3 seconds, many positive things happened to students and teachers' behaviors and attitudes. When students are given 3 or more seconds of undisturbed wait time, the length and correctness of their responses increase. The number of their I don't know and no answer responses decreases. The number of volunteered appropriate answers by larger number of students greatly increases. The scores of students on academic achievement tests increase. When teachers wait patiently in silence for 3 or more seconds, positive changes in their own teacher behaviors also occur. Their questioning strategies tend to be more varied and flexible. They decrease the quantity and increase the quality and variety of their questions. They ask additional questions that require more complex information processing and higher level thinking on the part of students. 3 seconds seems long when you're standing in front of a silent classroom. A colleague actually suggested bringing in a drink and taking a sip of your tea while waiting for responses. This one quick correction can help the flow of a lesson and allow students think time to formulate responses. Small groups and pairs is, of course, a great idea. I have had mixed results when pairing students for class activities. It seems so simple. Work with the person sitting next to you, but it seems to trigger real anxiety in some students, while others seem to have fun. And the research tells a similar story. In a survey of 36 students with mental health challenges, 15 students said small group discussion reduced their anxiety. 16 said it increased their anxiety. 5 said it did both. Drilling down, the researchers saw some common threads. Group discussion lowered anxiety when they got along with their group and when they could see others were struggling too. Some ways to mitigate the social anxiety of small group discussion are to assign groups, allow time for students to introduce themselves, and structure questions so there are no simple right or wrong answers. Another way to mitigate the social anxiety of group work is to explain exactly what the benefits are and why the activity is necessary for working with content. Think, pair, share can be highly effective to foster discussion because students have time to formulate their answers and actually practice what they will say before speaking to the entire group. We talked earlier about student anxiety and how that affects their ability to contribute. So what can we do to ensure that the classroom is a safe, supportive space? In Qualities of Effective Teachers, Strong describes the teacher as person. This means a teacher's affective characteristics or social emotional behaviors that are key to establishing a space where students can thrive and participate. Effective teachers are accepting, supportive, and persistent in challenging and engaging students. Effective teachers create a supportive and warm classroom climate, treat students equally and respectfully, value what students say, jokes when appropriate, takes pleasure in teaching, and exhibits active listening. This makes me laugh every time. We don't get paid enough, really. This is so much we have to do. Of course, active listening. To facilitate open discussion within the classroom, practice active listening. There are some key ways to just introduce this into your practice. Make eye contact. Focus on the person speaking. Hear as well as listen. It's normal to miss some words or not know their meaning. Ask, could you say that again? Could you explain? Ask questions, ask for more information. You can clarify, you can paraphrase. Not everyone knows exactly what they mean to say. Students do this all the time. They sort of give an answer, but you just have to push a little bit to get them to come around to what they really mean. Check your understanding. For example, say it sounds like what you're saying is, is that correct? And be patient, use wait time. I'm going to go through these very quickly. Response rates refers to how many students are responding to the teacher's questions. So these strategies have the potential to engage the entire class rather than only one student in a question answer scenario. Although these might not generate whole class discussion, they're good strategies for formative assessment and keeping the class engaged. You can just use hand signals. Students respond non-verbally. Response cards, use index cards for writing answers and hold them up. Response chaining, one student responds and another is asked to elaborate on that answer. A paired response, you can think pair share approach. A choral response, students repeat information together. I do this actually all the time with the library URL. I really want them to remember the library URL, so I make them all say it to me back all at the same time. Yeah, yeah, not everybody participates, I know, but I try. And wait time, pause for 3 seconds after questions. Another part of this, let's be honest, I often worry that students aren't responding because they're bored or they're asleep. A common class I teach covers career research, academic search complete, library services. So, what is unusual about these topics? When covering career research, instead of asking students to research a chosen career, I ask, research the most fun job on the, say, Occupational Outlook Handbook website. For a database discussion, instead of going straight to demo, I ask, how much does it cost to subscribe to all of the databases annually? So we look at the giant page of database that we have access to, and they sort of, I sort of ask them how much each of these individual items might cost, and then they come up with some numbers. The final number astounds them, and this leads to a discussion about the cost of access to information. You can use friendly controversy. Students discuss a topic about which they disagree. An example class I do is on fair use, in which students are given examples of cases involving copyright and judge whether it falls under fair use. There can be many interpretations, and students are asked to defend their opinions. And of course, avoid jargon. I turn to students to give definitions of research terms. What is a database? What is peer review? This puts it into ordinary terms, and then I can build on that definition. Here are a few activities for structuring a class discussion to make it more engaging, equitable, and challenging. A gallery walk or chat stations. Stations or posters are set up around the classrooms, and small groups of students travel from station to station together, performing some kind of task or responding to a prompt, either of which could result in a conversation. Affinity mapping is giving students a broad question or problem that is likely to result in lots of different ideas. An example is, what are colleges doing to promote sustainability? Have students generate responses by writing ideas on post-it notes and then placing them in no particular arrangement on a wall or whiteboard. Once lots of ideas have been generated, have students begin grouping into similar categories. Then label the categories. You can talk about how the categories relate to one another and so on. This can lead to generating keywords, narrowing topics, and selecting subject-specific databases. Another option, if you can you rearrange classroom seating? Can you sit around one large table or a few small tables? Set chairs in a circle. This is an easy way to move from teacher-centered discussion to student-centered. And the last couple of slides here, this is the question formulation technique. QFT is a step-by-step process designed to facilitate the asking of many questions. But it does more than that. It takes students through a rigorous process in which they think more deeply about their questions, refine them, and prioritize their use. This could be a great exercise for exploring the library homepage. Instead of, here are our services, and scrolling through the page, have students explore the page and create questions about resources or services they're curious about. You can answer some questions at the beginning of the class, midway through, and check in at the end to see if any questions remain. You can collect the questions and follow up if needed. These last two ideas are literally giving students the questions to ask. In the KWL method, the teacher provides a list of prompts to help students brainstorm what they know and what they want to know. Giving students a specific question to respond to can be an effective modification when students are unable to respond on limited background knowledge. This method is used in Van Arnham's chapter, How to Get to the Library from Here, There, and Everywhere in Critical Library Pedagogy. Some of the questions she asks are, what do you like or dislike about the library? Have you checked out a book? Do you know how to use the printers? Did you chat with a librarian? Students are able to add their own questions to the list as well. Students are paired, ask each other the questions, and report back to the class. The last one here is the Cephalonian method. Perhaps if anyone was around in the 90s, you remember this one, but I was just reminded of this. It involves the use of planted questions that encourage learner participation. The first set in this technique is to create a set of questions, the answers to which contain all the information you wish to include in your session. For example, how many books can I borrow? Decide which questions you want to include and then categorize them. Write the questions on cards, assigning a color to each category. Then you hand out the cards to your students. During the session, ask for a volunteer to read a question from a particular color. Using the color coding allows the presenter to have some control over the order of the questions. So questions can be addressed in a logical order. Continue through, say, the blue questions until they're finished, then move on to another color. Continue this until all the questions have been answered. I've got a few slides for my references here, but to wrap up, I'd like to call out one resource on this list here, the article by Dale Bauer, Another F Word, Failure in the Classroom. The author writes, I am still interested in achieving community in the classroom, but I now approach it from the perspective of failure, especially my own. Perhaps we are focused on two mutually conflicting goals, avoiding failure and self-exposure while creating a true learning community, which is impossible to create without self-exposure and much risk or outright failing. A true learning community depends on intimacy and human recognition. So please keep trying to get students to talk to you. Try all of the instructional strategies. Try changing the classroom. Try changing your approach and be willing to fail. It's okay. The risks we take might just come with great reward. I'll scroll through here and thank you very much. And I'll just stop sharing and see if there are any questions.